each day you'll note in our series, Still Standing, what echoes in adversity shapes eternity. And Tuesday and Wednesday we've had two very different accounts of just the unexpected curveball. You know, life is one way 1 minute and then it's another way the next minute. And how does my faith still speak and resound? And these biblical truths that I've heard, how have people experienced that in the middle of the storm, in the middle of the fire? And there has been super powerful testimonies being given this week. And I just really want to welcome Cam and Sav today. For those of you that don't know, this is Cam and Savannah Lloyd. They have a beautiful boy, Zion, who's running around here somewhere. And my goodness me, they have a story to share. And a faith that absolutely is echoing into eternity and beyond. And we're so looking forward to sharing with you today and for you coming along on a journey. If you haven't been part of our family in other days, this QR code is literally there because the way we design these workshops is very intentionally two-way. And I've sort of said from the beginning, sometimes you read a faith account or you read, you know, in Adventist Record, or you'll read somewhere and you'll be like, man, that's such a profound testimony, right? But you're sitting there with questions. Like, what do you mean the cradle's still empty and it's 9 years later? Like, how are you managing that pain? You know, like, so I think sometimes we have these questions, and the beauty of that QR code and the vulnerability of these people here today is bring them. Bring the questions. They're unafraid to share them because we're actually doing Faith Journey together. That's what that QR code is for you to share your questions, ask your questions. And we're going to shape eternity together as we do that. Dane, would you just open with a word of prayer for us, and then we'll kick off.
Shall we pray? Loving Heavenly Father, my prayer this morning is that this tent would feel less like a tent and more like a family room as we sit here, as we lean in to the story we're about to hear, and as we create a space that is safe but also vulnerable and authentic. And I just pray your Spirit would bring healing, your Spirit would bring hope, your Spirit would encourage and empower us to be able to echo you into our families and our workplaces and our local churches. So I just pray for your Spirit's leading in Jesus' name.
All right, it's story time. It's story time with Auntie Sav and Uncle Cam.
Awesome. So I'm Savannah. Can everyone hear me? Is that okay? Savannah. I'm Savannah. This is my beautiful husband, Cameron. So our story is quite a long one. So thank you for coming and listening. We're pretty happy to share our story. So I'll start with myself. So essentially, I grew up in a completely secular household. I moved from South Africa when I was 14 years old with my mum and sister. My childhood was quite complex. Though it was quite a loving household, there was pretty severe addiction and mental health issues. So when I was about 15, essentially I started living out of home, and I lived mainly with friends. And I sort of grew up with this really broken, empty feeling inside of me for a lot of my childhood and teenagehood. And because I grew up seeing addiction being the way that you sort of soothe and regulate yourself, that kind of was just the natural progression for me. So probably from the ages of 16, 17, I had pretty serious addiction issues and was making some pretty poor decisions for my life. And I had very little parental influence or anyone to kind of go to for that mentorship and for that love that I was looking for. And so essentially, by the time I was 18, 19, I was pretty broken individual. I didn't really see a point of living. I remember even thinking to myself at 18, like, what is the point of this? You just live and suffer and then you die? Like, what is the actual point of life if this is what it is? And around that time I started dating Cameron. And so Cameron's story is actually very different to mine. He grew up in...
And Savannah, maybe just before we jump over to Cameron's story, I'm really interested to hear, as you're growing up through these teenage years, I know it was a secular household, but nonetheless, what was your picture of God like? Did you have any thoughts, any construction in your mind of who God was, what he was like?
Yeah, so my mum actually was raised in a very strict traditional Christian household, and she really felt as though Christianity was, it was a burden, and she had this mindset that she wanted us to choose whether we wanted to believe in God, but of course in society paints a picture of God even if you haven't grown up in a church. And so I always felt an immense guilt, even though I didn't know God, even though I didn't have a relationship or hadn't been to a church. I always grew up feeling guilty and feeling like I wasn't enough and that I would burn in hell someday. So even though I was raised secular, that guilt and that shame, it's consistent in our society. So I did have that picture of God, that he was just there to look down on me and to, I suppose, punish me for eternity.
Yeah, that's helpful for us to know, because it'll be important for us to keep in the back of our minds as we progress the story. And maybe we can just turn now and look at Cam and Cam's growing up, teenage years, sort of that, what's happening in parallel to your childhood, Savannah and Cam.
I grew up in a very Christian household, a very, very good Christian household.
Yeah, so Cam, he was raised in a very beautiful Christian home. Like, he grew up coming to big camp, going to church, keeping the Sabbath, and his parents were incredible, did everything, to give him an amazing start to life, just like the picture of a Christian household. But as he kind of started to go into his teen years, he started to experience somewhat of an identity crisis. And I suppose he always felt as though, God just wasn't doing enough for him. And he essentially made a decision one day that he was just going to be bad, and he was just going to try walk the other way and essentially see what happens. And he also started to engage in some, irresponsible behaviours and lifestyle choices, and started hanging out with the wrong crew, and eventually, it got really bad to the point where he essentially committed a pretty terrible crime and ended up incarcerated. And at this time, this is when Cameron and I started dating each other. But I'd say for him, Cameron had this weird identity within him where he had been raised in this beautiful Christian home and then had this complete opposite life. And so it was like, this kind of mental gymnastics where at home he was this beautiful Christian golden boy that everyone loved and was good at sport and, doing all the right things. But then inside also had this kind of sin that was growing and starting to take over his identity completely. And so Cameron and I started dating probably a month or so before he was incarcerated. And strangely enough for me, that wasn't even a shocking, that's where I was. I was like, oh, it wasn't like a terrible thing. It was just, oh, that's just what happens. That's just the people that I'm surrounded with. But during the time that he was incarcerated, he had wrote me and talked about this amazing peace that he experienced in his life and forgiveness that he had received from his parents. And he actually organised for his parents to take me with them to church. And yeah, that was kind of the start of my own personal journey. That was very foreign to me. I was just taken aback by going to church where someone just asked me how I was. I just don't think I had experienced that in a very long time.
So in terms of what your picture of God was like, now you're experiencing a community that's showing you grace and forgiveness and acceptance. Is your picture of God starting to deconstruct and change a little bit now, Savannah?
It definitely was the starting point. Cameron ended up getting out of prison on bail, and
So hang on, you went to church for the first time while he's still in prison? Yeah, right, okay.
And so when Cameron got out, I mean, imagine a person who has just done something that everyone knows. He's just come out of prison. I mean, socially, that's a pretty awful position to be in. Yet this man was walking around like he was a prince. He was loved and was filled with light and peace. And you could just, I remember seeing him, and the grace was just beaming out from within him. And I was really taken aback by the forgiveness and the grace that Cameron was walking around with. And I wanted more of that. And I wanted to experience that same grace and that same forgiveness that he was experiencing.
Yeah, and I feel like this story up until this point, I feel like we could really unpack that, and this is the story, right? Like I feel like that very much fits in what echoes in Adversity Shapes Eternity. Like we're talking about drug addiction, incarceration, like wow. But in some ways, we're only beginning the story, and we did really feel like it was important, you know, with everybody that we've had up here, it's very important to know, hey, what did the faith journey look like before the curveball came and smacked you in the eyeballs and knocked you over? I think that is super important for us to understand because everybody's walk is different. So thank you for leading us lovingly through that. Now we're going to go to 18 months ago. Tell us a little bit now, because obviously you find grace, you find Jesus, you build this family unit, you get married, you have a child. Tell us a little bit about that season and then heading into that day.
Yeah, so I'd say Cameron and I both experienced a complete life-changing transformation in, you know, mind, body, spirit, heart. Our entire lives changed. We were just drawn to Jesus, we were drawn to his people, and we just wanted to grow in our faith, and we were just falling more and more in love with him every day. And we were just so stoked, like we were just beaming, and we just wanted to share in that love. So we would have Bible studies at our house weekly, and I'd make the same pot of dal and force all of our friends to eat it, and they always said it was great. But we were just on this amazing spiritual high where God was just ministering to us. We felt like we could hear his voice super clearly, and our lives were just getting better and better and better. We had a beautiful son. Our families were sort of coming together, and everything was going really well. We then decided that we were going to do some travel as a family, like we were just going to do normal young adult stuff, because we had obviously just been through a really strange start to life. So we were just coming into this kind of place where we're like, let's go do some travel. Cameron got his bachelor's, you know, everything was going really well. We went over to Bali, and we decided to do some ministry work over there, and yeah, our hearts were just full, and we were just exploding with joy and peace, and we were just, life was really amazing. And we ended up coming back to the Gold Coast after our travels, and we were starting to plan what the next stage of our life would be. because it felt like we just had this season of just amazing transformation and blessing, and we were trying to plan out what's next for us. Cameron has always been quite an athletic person. He grew up doing sports his whole life, and like most men in their late 20s decided, I'm going to run a marathon. So he'd been training for years, it seems like, would run 30 kilometers every Sunday. He was sort of the kind of person that would wake up at 4 a.m, go for a run, then go for a surf, then go to the gym, then come back and wake me up and say, oh, you're still in bed. Wow. Oh, that's nice. You're getting some rest. Very good. But he was just had so much energy and decided that he wanted to do the Gold Coast Marathon. And so that's what he decided to do, and he had a bit of a mission to support that run. And because we had volunteered at an orphanage in Bali, his purpose for the run was to fundraise for the rent and some costs to keep that orphanage going. And that's essentially what he decided to do.
Yeah, I was just flicking to my tech guys. I don't know if we'll be able to get it up, but I actually wanted to show, because just before the Gold Coast Marathon, Cam, in his awesomeness and humility, does a photo shoot, right? And it's epic, actually. It's so good. And leading up, so you guys are part of Kingscliff Church, so, I've known you in this season, and really, like, these photos of Cam are just amazing. He's training hard, and I don't know if we'll get the photo up, and it's okay if we don't, but he's literally there, like, throwing his arms up, and you are, like, you're declaring God's glory, God's power, God's authority. You're giving him praise for the body that he's blessed you with and the way that you have been stewarding that body, right, to be able to do things with it. And, that's the setting and the tone that you're going into a Gold Coast Marathon with. That's the picture we see, like the day of, or it was the morning of, or the day before. I can't remember the last one, but it's phenomenal, and you really were using that experience to make God famous, right? That was your handle and your objective.
So Cameron was running the marathon, and we were all tracking him on our phones. Myself and Cameron's mum, Donna, and his sister Saffron, and Zion and Paris, our children, we were all waiting at the finish line for Cameron that day, and he just wasn't coming. And so, your mind starts to think of things that have happened. Maybe he's twisted his ankle, or he'd be so upset at himself for that, or, maybe something had happened. And, we were waiting for some time. It was probably 45 minutes had passed, and we started to see people who, because we were tracking him throughout the day, who were finishing the race. And so things started to get a little bit strange for us. We eventually went around and found a medic and asked if they could find out where Cameron was, because everyone has a tracker. And they didn't get back to us for about 20 minutes. We decided to leave to go to the spot where Cameron was, because we were finding him on Find My Friends. And one of the officials quickly ran up to Cameron's sister Saffron and sort of whispered something, and she just begins to run. This was a bit odd. Donna and I continued to walk back towards the car. We were going to go find Cameron, and Saffron runs up to her mum, gives her baby, and Donna says to me, Cameron's had a heart attack. And it was sort of like bloody murder. I mean, I was just in absolute denial, screaming, no, this can't be right. We ended up getting to the hospital, and it's bad when a social worker comes out. And that was just completely shocking. That, what do you mean? We ended up getting ushered into the ICU, and we were told that we couldn't see Cameron because he was in a really bad way. And after maybe 11 hours or so, we were eventually ushered into ICU, where Cameron was on 4 different life-saving machines. there were 2 nurses in there, and there'd probably been 20 doctors that were doing everything that they could to try and keep him alive. And of course, your whole life, everything that you have built up to that point, it just completely drops out from under you and everything shatters. So Cameron had multiple cardiac arrests due to overheating from the marathon. And the second cardiac arrest that he actually had a downtime of 54 minutes. So he had no heartbeat for nearly an hour. The fact that doctors, continue to work on him is an absolute miracle. And the fact that he sits here today knowing who I am, knowing who he is, loving his family and his friends and his son the same way is an absolute miracle. Essentially, Cameron was in a coma for about 2 months, and we were told that it was very unlikely that he would wake up, and if he did wake up, he would most likely be or remain in a vegetative state. About a week into Cameron being in ICU on all of these life-saving machines, we were told that he had what's called compartment syndrome in his legs, which is where the muscle tissue essentially starts breaking down and starts to die, and that was essentially killing him. So they had to start doing these orthopedic surgeries where they had to remove all of that dead tissue, and after 8 surgeries, they had to remove Cameron's right lower limb as well. But I mean, you can just imagine having a completely normal life, an extremely healthy man.
Extremely healthy. We got the picture. I don't have a big zoomed up one, but that one right in the middle there, where he's super fit and he's throwing his hands up. That's sort of the image I have of Cam, of you in the lead up to the marathon day. And super different experience now. And when you say vegetative state, they were telling you at that point, we do not see brain activity. We think there's very little. Were you being told about what's going on, what they believed was going on in here, separate to what his body was physically doing?
So they said there was no chance that he didn't have a brain injury. And to what level, you just kind of have to wait and see. So during that time, because we live on the Gold Coast and we were about half an hour away from the hospital, but we had John and Darrell, who are actually here. They lived only about 10 minutes away from the hospital, and they allowed us to stay with them many times. But they kind of housed us, fed us, made us laugh, comforted us. And there was probably on day 2 when we were at our height of, is Cameron going to make it through the night? And that's what it was like for a very long time. Is he going to make it through the night? I remember this meal that Darrell had made for us, and I think it was green curry, if I'm not mistaken. It could have been. But I remember us before the meal having a prayer, and you can imagine how broken our family was at that moment and how anxious and terrified and fearful we were, just living, every minute as it came. And I remember, I think John said a prayer before dinner, and I remember feeling these angel wings wrapping around me and just knowing that God was with me. And we didn't know what was going to happen to Cameron, whether he was going to survive, but I just knew that he was there and that was okay.
Profound moment, and I know we've spent time talking, so I knew that story of God revealing himself in a way, because obviously God in his foreknowledge knows the journey ahead. right? And the fact that Cam was alive is in some ways just like the beginning of your journey. And so God's like, in that moment, when you're sitting there, is like, no, I need to give her a tangible enfolding of angel wings so that she knows with all the things that are coming next, I'm with her. Because that's what happens, and this is kind of what we're doing with these sessions, is it's a living word and a living God, you know, and so you need to extract and latch onto and show that God demonstrates his faithfulness when you're in the middle of it, because really, you're still in the middle of it. Tell us a little bit how that's sort of looking, and thank you so much, team, for taking my last minute request. I just wanted to show that, and the QR code is up.
Because a question that's in my mind is, okay, you're experiencing God come through with giving this sense of peace and this sense of hope, but somewhere in your mind was there a sense of, were you cross with God? Was it, God, this is unfair? God, my husband's just posted up saying, God, I give glory to my body, and now this is what he's going through. Was there a bit of a tension in your mind between all these conflicting pieces of data that you're trying to process?
Yeah, so I think the tension came a little bit later, because at the start, I think that I was holding on to God so tightly that I couldn't let that anger, or I couldn't let that slip into my psyche. I had to hold on to the faithfulness. And so, you know, most people would come up to me and you just think, why? Why did this happen? And actually at the time, I had more of a mindset of, why not me? Why not me? Terrible things happen to people every single day. What about me makes me exempt from the suffering? You see it throughout the Bible. There is no story that has a perfect, happy ending without significant difficulties and just pain and suffering and loss that people go through. So I think the anger or the wrestle came a little bit later.
So, but you're going through this as a wife, but what about as a mum? So as Cam's there in ICU and it's all very up in the air, undefined, what are you saying to your son? What's that mother-son dynamic? How's that unfolding?
Because Zion's like 4 at the time? 4.
Yeah, Zion had just turned 4, so that was obviously extremely challenging, because, I mean, especially when, you know, Cameron lost his leg, we were actually keeping it a secret from Zion for a little while, because how do you even explain this to a 4-year-old? I mean, up to this point, he had a wonderful start to life, and you, as a parent, you do everything you can to prevent childhood trauma. You know, everything that you do in those first few years, you're so mindful of, and you're so thoughtful in the way that you present and the way that you parent. And this was, by definition, childhood trauma. And to be honest, I still don't know how that's going to unfold, but I do know that we have to show resilience, and we have to teach our children resilience. And even though it was really difficult, and sometimes I was completely disengaged, to be completely honest, because I was surviving, the overall picture, I wanted to teach my child resilience, teach my child why we believe in God, and, you know, just see how it plays out.
And I think in the cries of your heart in that first in ICU, so Cam is still unconscious, you know, you're not able to communicate with him, you know, being kept alive by machines, is the cry of your heart like, Lord, just let him live? Like, is that kind of the prayers? Is that like, as you're clinging to, it's like, you know, I want him, I need him, let him live. Is that primarily what's on repeat for you?
Yeah, to be honest, my cry was, please don't make me a widow. And, you know, as Cameron started to wake up, he was unable to sit up on his own, unable to hold his head up, unable to speak, unable to breathe on his own at the start, has had to relearn how to eat. Everything that he can do now, hold the microphone, take a sip of water, all those little things that you don't even think of that you just do every single day, he's had to relearn. And so he ended up staying in hospital for about 8.5 months. And when he came home, he was only just strong enough to transfer into the wheelchair on his own. He was barely speaking. And so my prayer was, do not make me a widow. And God granted that prayer. When he came home, I started to quickly realize that it was my husband, but it was a completely different version of him. And so I started to deeply grieve the man that he was, whilst also being delighted that I still had him and that we could still have a relationship and just see where life will take us.
Kim, I wonder, do you have any recollection of any, obviously you were in a coma for it, but before, after, do you have any memory recollection of any of this?
I don't have any recollection of the marathon.
When you woke up, Cam, you knew this was your wife? And you were like, I've jacked it in life. Whatever happened before, look how beautiful she is.
Yes, that is true. I knew that Savannah was my wife.
So this has been it's 18 months, is it, or a bit longer? So our first question, and please feel free to send them in. How long ago was the actual accident? So he comes out of ICU like 8.5 months later, and we're doing this new journey. But how long ago was the marathon? I want to say 18 months, but it's...
It was the 2nd of July 2023, so it's just been 2.5 years.
Wow, yeah. So I'm sure your prayers now are different, and your experience with God now is different. How does your relationship with God look like now? Right? Like you're still in a lot of ways, and people talk about this, right? Like you don't come out the other side of grief. You don't come out the other side. It's just like you keep reshaping your everyday. And for you, your new reality is different. Like it's you're processing things all the time, and you're young and beautiful, and you have one child. I'm sure in the life plan of Cam and Sav, it wasn't going to stop at one. Like, talk to us a little bit about what your wrestle is with God now, and as you're sitting with that gratitude that you have a living, you're not a widow, but you're wrestling in that space of gratitude and loss simultaneously, actually.
Yeah, so I think the wrestle started a little bit later for me once the kind of overwhelm of the hospital and the ICU and the kind of overstimulation of that started to settle down, and reality started to settle down, and mum and dad went back to work, and people started to give us space to try figure out and adjust to what our new life was. I think the internal wrestle with my relationship with God sort of started there, because I felt really angry. And I mean, you read about people having, being paralyzed and being completely healed, or being blind and completely, can see again. And I think I just felt so angry, like, God, why haven't you come through yet? Even though he had a downtime of nearly an hour, even though he learning how to speak, remembering who we were, all these amazing blessings, having a church and an entire community support us to a point where I didn't have to work for a year so that I could just be there with Cameron. There were so many blessings, yet it wasn't what I wanted. And I really still sometimes struggle with, God, how much longer, you know? When are you going to come through? And sometimes I did want to just yell at the sky. God's like, I'm right here. No need to yell. But yeah, I think that, and you see that all through the Psalms. You know, you see that it's not just, oh, I have this experience with God and now my life goes like this. You see this constant battle, this constant pulling away and coming back. And I think, yeah, if that's something that you're experiencing, I think just, you know, remembering that God is always there. He's not only there when life is going really good and everything's going up for you, but he's in those dark moments as well, and he's there to comfort you, and his spirit is open and willing to be there for you in those moments too.
I think in some ways, you know, I was angry on your behalf, right? Because your story, and you kind of flew over it today, but your story before this was already full of so much pain and so much tragedy. You know, a 15-year-old on the street sleeping with friends' couches, and, you know, drug addiction, and just, you know, you sort of like, that was more than enough, you know, and then you find this beautiful experience and the grace of God, and you sort of, you know, you were raised in a beautiful family, you just made dumb choices. Like, I love you so much, but yours is different, but it's like, you know, because Sab had actually shared her testimony at church before Cam's accident, and you sit there and it just felt so sad, you know, and I know you're the kind of person that you're so beautiful and warm, and you'll always find the good and the beauty in your family and in your story and in your experience, but ultimately it was full of trauma, full of pain, full of loneliness and a lack of love that a child deserves. And it's like you find something and then it's just ripped away. And this is why it's so important that we're having these conversations and stories, because you're not alone in this experience. And as you beautifully shared, you know, you read these stories and resonate with. Faith is full of, you know, we're in the battlefield. The things that are happening here are not the way they're supposed to be, and God has made us for more. Tell us, I don't even have a question, I was just talking, sorry about that.
So we've heard a bit of Savannah and her reaction and her anger towards God. What about you? Are you cross with God?
I do think that I am cross with God, but I've learned how to deal with it.
Is there a specific Bible verse that you find comfort in?
There is Psalm 23. I forget verse 2.
Psalm 23, a psalm that was actually shared by Generic yesterday.
Yes. God is my shepherd. I shall not want. I shall not fear.
And he leads me by still waters.
Yeah.
I think like it was so interesting because Cameron was, you know, this morning I asked him if there was a Bible verse that you would want to share with people, or that you would resonate with. What would it be? In my mind, I was thinking Psalm 23, and you were like, Psalm 23, and I was like, awesome. But yeah, I think the beautiful thing about Psalm 23 is that it takes you out of the situation that you're in, and it actually it sort of transfers you into that heavenly place. Like, I guess it's like you don't have to be stuck in that difficult experience, that your relationship with God is internal and in your heart, and you can kind of go to that place with him at any time, no matter how difficult the situation that you're in, and lay by those still waters in those green meadows. You know, go there.
Early on, Cam is actually still in hospital. He hadn't been discharged yet, and I'd invited Sav to come and speak to. I'm the chaplain at Gold Coast Christian College, but this was last year actually, and I actually wasn't the chaplain, I was just a teacher, but I'd invited you to come and share, and Cam was still in hospital, and the kids were so moved, Sav, by your story, and I had said, hey, if there's any chance Cam could record something, like what would he say because, you know, in the school, at least 50% of our kids are non-believers. They're either agnostic or they're atheists or they're not sure. And I sort of said, is there any chance, you know, it's not like I visited Cam a lot. I didn't know how many words can he put together, what does this look like, but I knew that there was some of that. And yeah, tell us a little bit about what Cam did that day and what he said to the kids and what that meant for you.
Yeah, so at the time Cameron was, you know, just learning how to speak. It still is quite a struggle. And at the time, I think he was doing more one-word answers. You know, Cameron, are you comfortable? Yes, like that was kind of at the time the extent of what we're getting out from him, and we were very blessed that he continues to make progress in his speech journey. But he actually recorded a video, and in that video he managed to say, Jesus is the way. Nothing is as important as your relationship with Jesus. It's just so taken back by that.
I remember you being shocked. You were just like, oh, I'll ask him. But I know at the time you were thinking, Rob's not going to get anything back. And like Cam just makes this declaration of, you know, nothing matters more than Jesus. And I know, you know, in that room, you know, with kids and with us, it's like the enemy has robbed so much from this family, but he has not robbed the faith of Jesus Christ in the life of Cam. And he testifies that. It's like the thing, and that's the thing. He's not taken that. Hey, Cam, do you pray? I've had a question about your, you know, in your relearning, do you, because I'm sure it's difficult to read, like, are you praying and talking to God? How, like, what does it look like with you and Jesus now?
I do need to do more things.
You do?
Yes, I do. And I do that. But I know that I need to do more.
Need to talk more.
Yes.
I think we all do, Cam. I think we all forget. Do you feel God close to you? Do you feel his love and his peace?
He is very close to me right now. Yes, he is.
So, Cam and Sav, our series is still standing. So,
Cam made a joke, like, yeah, I'm not. Too soon. Because the reality is, even though, and he's still got a sense of humour, I do. Absolutely, that's the other thing the enemy didn't rob. For those who may not be aware, he's in his second leg, the compartment syndrome. While he has a second leg, it's not like that Cam can stand on it and then put a prosthetic. It's non-functioning. So you are still standing, but not. But yeah.
Not literally.
Thank you. But not just one, like I suppose, curveball. Not just one set of traumatic circumstances, but now a second lot of circumstances. So, if you could just answer this question, I suppose as simply as you can, like, how are you still standing? Or maybe here for both of you, like, how are you still standing?
Still a gentleman.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. You know, the fact that we had that amazing faith transformation in our life, that definitely set us up to where we could handle what was to come and the challenges that was to come. I think if I didn't have a relationship with God prior to this, I don't know where I'd be. I know I wouldn't still be standing. I think my mental state would be completely different. I mean, this is an awful thing to happen. You know, I was 28 when this happened. Cameron had just turned 30. There is a lot of loss. There is a lot of grief. There was a lot of dreams that we had for our life. But I truly believe the fact that we have a relationship with God, that we had that foundation going into this, that gave us firstly the kind of knowing that we are in times of battle, that this life is going to be filled with suffering, that kind of gave us a starting point. And then having amazing family and amazing friends that through our darkest times, through our darkest hours, like yourself, Mel, decided to link arms with us and go, actually, we're going to come on this journey with you. We're going to walk with you through this. And we're going to pray for you when you don't have the strength to. And we're going to feed you and we're going to help you because we know that you can't do it on our own. That, I feel like, is everything and the reason why we're able to be here and share our story and it not be completely in vain.
It's oh, cool. That's crazy. She just answered my question. I know, I love that. Cam, a question has got: how many marathons are you planning to run in heaven?
A lot.
What would you say? What have you learnt about God? I guess post marathon day. What do you know about him now that maybe you didn't know before? Like, how has he revealed himself to you in a new way? It's not an easy question, I know.
I think I can answer that. We always have the door when he's knocking. That I sit on now. That we always knock on the door. And he should knock on the door too. And this is about answering it to him.
Amen.
God is always knocking on the door, and the question is, are we willing to answer when God knocks?
And I remember you saying, Sav, when Cam made that video saying, Jesus, declaring to a bunch of kids, Jesus is Lord and he's still good. And I remember you sort of saying, I know that, if lives can be changed because of what Cam shares, even one, he would say it's worth it.
Yeah, so when Cameron first went in hospital, obviously we had our entire community, plus people all over the world praying for Cameron. And one of Cameron's long-term friends, who was like very anti-religion, very anti-God, is sort of the type of character that says, oh, I could never go into a church because I'd burn, I'd set the thing on fire. He called me and goes, I've been praying for Cam. I remember just thinking, okay, there's more to this story. That seems, it seems worth it in some weird, painful way. If it means that he is starting to believe that he could pray to a God and that God answers, and that Cameron, if he has a lifetime of miracles to come, I really believe that. Maybe it's not all for nothing.
Cam's memory, a question has come through, Sav. So the short-term memory, the long-term memory, like what's easy for him and tricky for him? Like how does his memory work now? Like, do you feel like all of these experiences you're having, like, even sharing about today, will you be able to talk with Cam next week and go, how good was that day? Will he be like, what day at Big Camp?
Yeah, the memory, it's inconsistent.
Getting better.
It is getting better, but it can be inconsistent, to be completely honest. So Cameron, he can make new memories, but the part of his brain where the issue, the memory issues have occurred is he needs prompts to kind of access the filing cabinet where those memories are stored. So sometimes he does that really well. Sometimes he'll remember something deep in ICU, and I'm like, you remember that? You remember Mel coming in and singing Amazing Grace to you. But other times it's like very inconsistent, and we have repetitive conversations, which is fun. Yeah.
Because I think sometimes too, like maybe that's one of the ways God's showing you, like you're remembering enough to know that he is good and that he's with you, right? Like, Sav, is there a verse that is there something that you keep on repeating in your mind? Or like, are you finding You have Zion, full of energy. Actually, this is my question. I had 7 questions in my head. I'm going to distill it to one. How are you finding the energy to be a wife to Cam, which looks different to what it did before? To be a mum to a 6-year-old that's adorable and full of energy. Like, how are you arming yourself to get up and do the things that need to be done that day?
Yeah, I think my relationship has slightly changed. Sometimes I really struggle in my relationship. Sometimes I...
With God?
With God, yeah. I think it's... Yeah. But just talking with him and sharing with him, and I love praying before going to bed. That's probably my time. And we'll do a big family prayer together. And favourite verse, I mean, as Cameron shared, Psalm 23, like just that is just repeating in my mind all the time.
Sav, this question is specific for you. How is your relationship with your family now? And do you have family members that are still struggling with addiction, that have not turned to God? Yeah, great question.
Yeah, so my relationship with my mum was extremely complex growing up. She had quite severe addiction issues and was an alcoholic for the majority of my life. I always talk about this with Cameron because the impact of us becoming Christians and the impact of Cameron's family has had a ripple effect onto my family directly. And just by my mum and my sister living adjacent to us, the way that Cameron and I relate to each other and the way that Cameron's family relate to us has had a direct impact on my family by default. So my mum hasn't drunk or smoked cigarettes in 3 years.
And that's a miracle, right?
Which is an absolute miracle. And, she just came back from Bali and she was telling me about she was getting her nails done and they were playing Christian music in there and she was singing along. So she's actually, really started to come into her own relationship with God, and we get on really well, and she's an amazing grandma. And I truly believe that the impact of just Christ in our lives has directly impacted the way that my family interacts with each other, and that, it's almost like a butterfly effect, a ripple-on effect of love, and how that kind of goes out into your families.
Another question has come through. Has it brought you even closer as a couple or a family, like this trial? I feel like it's not easy to answer, but I'll let you try. Has it brought you closer?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we always had an awesome friendship, but we definitely have a deeper relationship now. And what we take joy in are the simple things, the little things, because that's what we've got. I think prior to this accident, I maybe had a feeling of like I wanted more, or I wasn't always content, or you're like, didn't wash the dishes again. Like what I do to go back to being normal without Cameron washing dishes, but it's the little things now, and literally Cameron will get me a glass of water and like bring it into the bed, and it's in between his legs. He's like, water for you, my queen. And so of course it's brought our family closer, and our son gets to witness his mum and dad go through something really difficult, and we still love each other, and we still honor God, and I just absolutely. It's really weird to go through such a deep suffering that has not ended. It's not like we've had a suffering, there's been this miraculous, progress, and now life is good again. And how good's that? It's out every single day is a challenge, but we still joy and peace and just blessings in our life.
And it's such a witness, right? Like, when I think of, our Filipino family that, like they've come from so much trauma. There's a family who've come from so much trauma, right? And our church family has rallied around them. They haven't known Christ. One of the girls in the family, the daughter, has started really finding Jesus and come into our church community. The mum is still very closed off because she's only known physical abuse, a range of different things. But she actively says, whatever I tell her about God, me, Mel, as an individual who loves her, washes off her because I have no idea what it looks like to have lived the life that she lives, right? It's all well and good for a Christian who's been bubbled in this lovely little, like, I have a husband, I have 4 kids, I have not had the rug, like, do we all have our obstacles? Yes. But she's overtly said to me, my words, even though they're anchored in truth in her life, don't mean very much to her. But she will literally say people like Kaz North, Cam and Sav, who will still testify of the goodness and love of God, that she's got an ear for, like that. She's still got a very closed heart. And I think this is sort of the stuff that's hard to unpack and understand, but it's like God needs these stories where you're still echoing, you're resounding, you're shouting out His faithfulness and goodness and provision and truth of the gospel, because really you could have, and one of our questions has sort of come saying, hey, have you considered just leaving the faith? Like, angry enough? Did you get to a point where you were angry enough to say, I reject this? Like, I reject faith? Because people would understand, there are people who've faced adversity and walked away from truth in the face of it. Was that on the table for you?
No, because I've experienced life without God, and that's worse. That was worse than what we're going through. And at least with what we're going through, we still have hope. There's still more. Like someone asking, how many marathons will Cameron do in heaven? Like, what I imagine, we're going to get to heaven, Cameron's going to be behind a DJ booth with a silk white shirt on. It's going to be like, come hear my story. I still have hope. There's still hope. Whereas without that hope, then what?
How different do your dreams for the future look now than before the accident? So how different do your dreams for the future differ now from before the accident? I think in some ways you answered that, like you're just so grateful for the little things now, but what about your dreams? What are the dreams for your future now?
My dreams, and I think Cameron's dreams, is we'd love to continue to share our story and kind of show people that difficult, extremely challenging things can happen in your life, but you can still find joy, you can still have a full life. And life's not perfect.
What's your advice? And again, I'm mindful it's 12:06. I know, we will do a wrap up. But what is your advice to someone if they've rejected God due to their trauma?
Rejecting God is the question, or have you kind of decided that it's easier for you to do it on your own if you take full control of your life? Because having God in your life isn't the easier option, which can be sort of a complex thing or theme to try to understand and impact in yourself. I know for myself, sometimes I hide from God and push him away, and then I start believing that I'm not worthy of his presence anymore. And it kind of, the further you push God away, the more it opens you up to painting God in a different picture. But if you just go to God, if you just ask him to speak to you, he will show you who he truly is. But I think it's something you have to do every single day. You have to continuously seek his presence and allow him to be in relationship with you, because he will not push himself onto you.
And that's super biblical. That's what you were saying, Cam, too. Like he's always there knocking. It's our choice whether we open the door. Like, this is why the testimonies are so important, because it's a living word. That's what it says. He stands at the door and knocks. He longs for our company. Like the God of the universe longs for you to be with him, and he misses you when you're not. Like that daily abiding, that daily anchoring, like all the things that it says are true.
I think in the first psalm it says that God delights in you. It's like, do you truly believe that? Do you truly believe? Because I know I struggle with this sometimes, and I don't know if it's a self-worth thing. Sometimes I struggle with this idea that God delights in me, like when a child runs up to a parent and their face lights up. Like that's how God sees us. And sometimes we stop believing that about ourselves, and I think that makes us reject God.
Well, we've experienced the full spectrum of emotions as we've been leading into Cam and Sav's story. We've sort of heard about some joys, about some tragedies. We've seen the beauty of love and faithfulness within a marriage. We've seen the love and the faithfulness of God. We've spoken about hope. We've spoken about uncertainties. There's just been so much that we've covered just in this hour, and we just want to thank you so much for being vulnerable and being willing to be here and be yourselves and be authentic. But I think to finish this off, Cam, would you be so kind as to pray to wrap up our session?
Dear Lord, thank you for this time. Thank you that we've been invited to share, and that we can share what you've done for our life. Please, Lord, do what you've done for our life and other people's lives too. In your name, amen.
For those of you that are able to join us, we have one more day tomorrow. We're going to tie a whole bunch of threads together and declare as a community that God is still good no matter what. Looking forward if you're able to join us tomorrow at 11 o'clock. We'll see you there.
See you in a little bit.